The Qur'an. Now, I had a discussion last weekend from people who are really missionaries for the Qur'an to the Christian world, and they're really aggressive, and they have a whole list of errors in the Bible, transmission errors, and all kinds of nonsensical errors. They don't seem to know what they're doing, but they throw a couple of things up at you, and it's a transmission error. But it's easily resolved. And the Qur'an is perfect. It's always been perfect. All these generations, everybody's copied it perfectly, and blah, 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 blah. Well, let's look at the record. May 1995, Joseph Smith wrote an apologetic paper on the Qur'an. The abrogation of Qur'anic verses. The abrogation of, we'll explain that word in a second. The abrogation of Qur'anic verses presents a problem for Muslims today. As we all know, a man can make mistakes and correct them, but this is not the case with God. God has infinite wisdom and cannot contradict himself. Abrogation flies in the face of Surah 634 and 1065, which we quote below. There is none that can alter the words and decrees of Allah. An even more damaging pronouncement is made in Surah 482, which reads, Do they not consider the Qur'an? Had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein much discrepancies. Muslim authorities try to explain the internal contradictions, and we'll go into them, in the Qur'an by stating that certain passages of the Qur'an are annulled, Mansukh, by verses revealed chronologically later than themselves. These verses, which replace them, are referred to as Nasikh, Nasikh. Yet there is by no means any certainty as to which disagreeing verses are Mansukh and which are Nasikh, since the order in which the Qur'an was written down was not done chronologically, but according to the length of the suras. From the preceding section, we have found that even the text at our disposal was found and collated piecemeal, leaving us little hope of delineating which suras were the more authentic. Furthermore, Muslim tradition admits that many of the suras were not even given to Muhammad in one piece. According to tradition, some portions were added to other suras under the direction of Muhammad, with further additions to the former suras. Therefore, within a given surah, there may be found ayas, A-Y-A-S, which were early, and others which were quite late. How then could we know which were the more authoritative, in view of the contradictions? The law of abrogation is taught by the Qur'an in Surah 2, 106 and 108, stating, We substitute one revelation for another. So one overrides the other? This is echoed in Surah 1786, which reads, If it were our will, we could take away that which we have sent thee by inspiration. In Surah 16:101, the law of abrogation is clearly defined as one verse being substituted by a better verse. Verse 101 read, None of our revelations do we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better or similar. Knowest thou not that Allah hath power over all things? Well, if he does, how come there's a mistake beforehand and it has to be corrected later? Whichever which is which, I don't know. Din estimated the number of abrogations at between 5 to 500. Others say it stands closer to 225. So what this shows is that the science of abrogation is an inexact science indeed, as no one really knows how many of the verses are to be abrogated. Now let's just look that up in the dictionary. From my Webster's Dictionary, abrogated, to annul by an authoritative act, to abolish by the authority of the maker or his successor, to repeal, applied to the repeal of laws, decrees, ordinances, the abolition of customs, and so on. Abrogated. abrogate. New Testament, whose laws, like those of the Medes and Persians, they cannot alter or abrogate. So we have that definition, and it's evident in the Qur'an. So what this shows is that the science of abrogation is an inexact science indeed, as no one really knows how many of the verses are to be abrogated. Underlying this claim of abrogation is another concern. How can a divine revelation be improved upon? Was it not perfect the first time? Would it not have been perfect from the start? Yusuf Ali, in his defense of abrogation, claims that there is a need for progressive revelation within Scripture, saying its form may differ according to the needs and exigencies of the time. Christians believe in progressive revelation as well. But they were talking about correction, as God reveals and changes his will for people as they change culturally over a period of generations. The problem with suras 2:106, 1786, and 16:101 is that they do not refer to revelation given prior to Muhammad, but refer uniquely to the Qur'anic verses themselves. One cannot claim progressive revelation within a space of only 20 years. This was the time in which the Qur'an was written. The period found in the previous scriptures spans 1,500 years. People and cultures change in that amount of time. Thus, a revelation would reflect those changes. To demand the same for a revelation of a mere 20 years suggests that God is not all-knowing. The only other option can be that the recorder made corrections and then came up with revelation as to authenticate those corrections. While you decide, let's look at some of these abrogations. Some examples of these abrogations are Surah 2, 142 to 144. We find the change of the Qibla, the direction of prayer from Mecca to Jerusalem and back to Mecca. Couldn't they make up their mind? 2. The inheritance laws in Surahs 4:7 and 21:80 provides an equal share for women and men, and then it's doubled for men in Surah 4:11. 4:7. From what is left by parents and those nearest related, there is a share for men and a share for women, whether the property by small or large, a determinate share. Here, the context gives an apparent equal share for men and women, but several surahs below it is contradicted. Allah thus directs you, as regards your children's inheritance, to the male a portion equal to that of 2 females. If only daughters, 2 or more, their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. If only one, her share is a half. For parents, a 1/6 share of the inheritance to each. If the deceased left children, if no children, and the parents are the only heirs, the mother has a 1/3. If the deceased left brothers or sisters, the mother has a 1/6. The distribution in all cases after the payment of legacies and debts. Ye know not whether your parents or other children are nearest you in benefit. Apologize, I have a little bit of a cold. So, let's see, where do we leave off? The distribution in all cases after the payment of legacies and debts. So, ye know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit. These are settled portions ordained by Allah. And Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. Notice the discrepancy. Any honest reader will. And furthermore, it just doesn't add up. Surah 4:11 to 12, 176, speaking on the inheritance law, specifies that when a man dies and leaves behind, for instance, 3 daughters, 2 parents, and a wife, the 3 daughters will receive 2/3 of the inheritance. 1/3 will go to the parents together, according to verse 4:11, and 1/8 for the wife in Surah 4:12, which adds up to more than the available estate. A second example, if a man leaves only his mother, his wife, and 2 sisters, then the mother receives 1/3, 4/11, 1/4 for the wife, 4/12, and 2/3 for the sisters, 4/176, which then adds up to 15/12 of the available property. That's more than the total. The change of night prayers from a full night in Surah 73, 2-4, to a half or less, or whatever was easy to do in Surah 73:20. And we have the change of punishment for adulteresses, beginning with life imprisonment, found in Surah 4:15, and then changed to 100 strokes for flogging, according to Surah 24:2. Remember that these 2 examples make no mention of the previous missing ayah, which prescribes the stoning for those who commit adultery. It is also interesting to note that homosexuals were let off if they repented, according to Surah 4:16, though this same allowance was not given for heterosexuals. And point 5, the change of the retaliation laws, where retaliation for the crime of murder was confined to people of equal rank, slave for slave, in Surah 2:178. Then it was to be carried out only against the murderer by the heir, Surah 17:33. Note, Ali adds qisas and forgiving to the Arabic. Okay. The change of the days of creation from 6, 754, 2559, to 8, 41:9 to 12. 41:9. Is it that you deny him, Allah, who created the earth in 2 days, and you claim others to be equal to him? Is he the Lord of all the worlds? The next verse begins with what verse 9 depicts as already created in 2 days. 41:10. He set on it, the already created earth, mountains, and bestowed it with blessings. And Allah estimated all its sustenance in 4 days, equally for those who ask prayers. So far, then, we have 6 days, 2 for creating the earth, 4 more for settling on the earth, mountains, items which add to the earth's creation, and were not an intrinsic part of its previous creation, items that are described as sustenance, i.e. that which sustains the earth, but not that which created it. 41:11. Then Allah commanded the heaven, and it was still smoke. He said to it and to earth, come together, willingly or unwillingly, they said. They said, we do come together in willing obedience. Then, a continuance of this creative action by Allah, we have Allah's work on the heavens to make them into 7 heavens, which was still unformed by unformed smoke after 6 days. Notice the word still, corroborating a sequence of events still not completed after 6 days. And in 41:12, so Allah decreed them as 7 heavens, one above the other in 2 days, and revealed to each heaven its orders. And we, Allah, adorn the lowest heaven with lights and retentions, gravity. Such is the decree of the exalted, the knowledgeable. Notice that the word rendered in appears in the same context of all of Allah's reactions or actions, which are reported in creating the universe 3 times. Notice the words then, still, and so, which demand an ongoing sequence. Hence, the context demands that the word in equal total length of time for the particular accomplishment of Allah in a series of events need to be added up to 8, as opposed to determining that the word in means inside the time of, or within. Another Arabic word needs to have been in the original text to be rendered inside the time of, or within, which is not in the original Arabic text. The phrase in 2 days in English demands the interpretation a 2-day duration, and in 4 days a 4-day duration. Furthermore, the context would be ridiculous if one said God created the earth in 2 days and added everything to the earth within 4 days, if what is intended is the additions are within 2 days. This is even more ridiculous when the same word is used for in the phrases in 2 days and in 4 days. So, why not then simply stipulate that the time it took to add everything, instead of being vague, was within 4 days is that it is with what is meant